book besties, welcome back to my channel. I can't grasp the idea that it's been a year and I'm filming like a video that I filmed at the beginning of my YouTube career, which is all the books I read this year. I'm so excited to talk about every single book I read this year. I read a total of, I don't even remember. I read a total of 63 books, which is a lot, which is more than I was predicting. Basically everything I read this year and what I think about them. Let's go. Kicking off this year, I read Bayou Bruiser by Jessa Kane. I heard Jessa Kane is no longer writing anymore. I don't know if that's true, but I saw it somewhere on the internet where she couldn't stop her books from being pirated, which is really sad to see, but also whoa, you were the first book I ever read this year. That's my little gossip. I don't know if it's true. I saw it on the internet, so trust the internet with a grain of salt. And this book, or more like a short story, was so interesting in the weirdest sense. I don't know how to describe it, but it was just so icky to me, so I don't know what came out of my mouth, but I think that's a clear representation of how I feel about this book. I think I gave it 2 stars. It's just so weird. I'm just gonna leave it there. But the second book I read was The Bromance Book Club. This is a 5 stars. It's so good. So such a classic romance. When I think of oh, a romance book, it's this. So good. But also men in a romance book club. I say it every single time, but could you ask for anything more? So good. Moving on, I listened to Honey and Spice on audiobook and I thought it was so cute. It just feels good. It's a good love story. It's a little bit of a slow burn. You don't feel the pressure of get together. It's more of they develop this really good connection and relationship and then they actually kick off their relationship. I gave it a 4 stars and I highly recommend it. Then I read Wash Day Diaries, and this is a graphic novel and it is so powerful and strong. Basically, they share their struggles, their joys, their happiness through their hair. I loved it. 5 stars, totally recommend. Next off, because I didn't learn my lesson the first time, I read another Jessa Kane book, which is really weird to put myself through, but I read When the Farmer Met the City Girl, and I think this kind of explains everything you needed to explain. Lifestyle difference, but there's also just a really weird male main character where he's just I don't know how to explain this dynamic. It's just you have to read a Jessa Kane book and experience for yourself and then come back and watch this video and just be I understand every single facial that you did. There's just no other way to explain it. Moving on, I read Only When It's Us by Chloe Lise. I loved Chloe Lise. This was the first book I read from her and I ended up loving the whole entire Bergman series. A really good story. It's just very heartfelt and warming and there's great representation. One of those books that doesn't really have a flaw. The characters are perfect. Whatever they navigate through, they navigate it so well and they communicate so perfectly. It's just top tier. I loved it. Moving on, I read The Dead Romantics. This, I actually think I listened to it on audiobook instead. I wanted to read this during Halloween, but I didn't, so I read it in January of this year. It was surprisingly very intriguing. I thought personally I wouldn't be into it for some reason. Basically, a ghostwriter falls in love with a ghost, and I thought the ending would be kind of how does this all work out? There's really no happy ending, unless she dies and she turns into a ghost, and then they can live happily together. But it wrapped up so well. The ending, it wasn't even oh my god, plot twist. It was just unpredictable. I didn't know how it would tie up and it tied up well. Next, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's either Juniper or Juniper. Did I say the same thing? Juniper or Jupiter. It is the second book in the Eden series by Devin Perry, and I surprisingly like this. I don't know why I came to this thinking the writing was going to be a little bit cheesy, but it was fine. It was well written. I just sound really picky, but the way I am with small town romance, it has to work out in a certain way. And this one did, so yay. Then I read Final Offer, which this one is a highly anticipated book. And I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, but I didn't like Final Offer. And I think that's a common opinion because I shared that on Book Talk and everyone was yeah, Cal is not it. It was a 600-page book and sometimes I'm kind of what is there to talk about? Next up, I read Intercepted, and I don't know if you can see, but the book is kind of faded a little bit right here. Sports romance, super good. I love this so much. It was a 5 stars, so dramatic, so much drama between the Wags, which is the wife and girlfriends of a sport athlete. It's a football romance, so that kind of community is so fast paced, but there's so much drama behind the scenes. I just loved reading all the gossip about it. Super good, I loved it. Then I read Nick and Charlie, the novella, which this is the short story before Nick goes goes into college. I remember enjoying it. It's hard to talk about like the books I read like in the past 8 months because I have short-term memory. I don't really remember anything. I think this is when I got my Kindle and I started the Riss, which is the Mine F series. So I never finished the whole series. I think it's like 5 or 6 books, but the first book, it was very like, whoa, like that is a badass woman. I remember it was a good book. I was entertained like throughout. I mean, how could you not be entertained? Like it's like really thrilling and moving really fast, but I never finished the series, so I can't tell you how it ends. Next up on audiobook, I listened to The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. This was good. I kind of don't remember a lot of it, but I remember like after finishing this audiobook, I was like, that was a good book. I enjoyed that, and then I moved on. It was a good steady paced book. Like things happen kind of like in chunks like this, and there's never a lot of like drama. Then I listened to Ignite by Melanie Harlow. I really wanted to get into Melanie Harlow because I saw a lot of reviews on this author. This book personally wasn't for me. I think because of like the age gap and the way he kept on emphasizing how young she was, that kind of threw me off. I'm like, if she's so young, why do you look at her like that? Like that's weird. Next off, I read Better Than the Movies. This one is so cute. Like it really is just an adorable book. It's such a good love story. It is enemies to lover, but also like the childhood aspect. Like they would known each other. What is that word? They known each other since being little kids. Even though it's like an enemies to lover, you can really see like in everything that Wes does, the male main character, that he has always liked her. So he's also a hopeless romantic. After Better Than the Movies, I read Better Than the Prom, which is a short story of also Wes and Liz, and this really confirmed that he's also a hopeless romantic. Next off, I read The Arcade by Harley LaRox. This is part of a 3-book like short story. Basically in the series, it's a bunch of first dates and it's just super smutty. It's really dirty. I don't know how to explain it except for I really enjoyed it. 3 mini novellas that are just super dirty and smutty and just people going on first dates, and it's just kind of like, whoa. It was awakening. It was really like, whoa, this is what Harley LaRox writes, and I like it. Next up, I read Barbarian Mind by Ruby Dixon. I listened to this one on audiobook. I don't remember which one this is about. If you don't know the Ice Planet Barbarian series, it is a series of just like blue, tall, aliens, possessive, alpha, but also really sweet and charming at the same time. But everything is just very predictable in the sense that all the aliens are kind of the same and all the characters sort of blend into each other. So I could say if you read the first book, you kind of read the whole series, but the next book is just going to be different character names. But it is still good if you want something entertaining, because how could you not be entertained with blue aliens? Next up, I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. I think I had a hard time getting into it, but once I did, it was fine. I think I had an okay time after listening to it. I think I gave it like a 3.5. I don't remember it now, but I don't remember hating it, so I think I had a good time. Then I discovered Bella J, who is an indie author on Kindle Unlimited. I don't know if you can buy her books, but I know she's on Kindle Unlimited. She is so good, so underrated, and I can't believe I didn't find her until this year, but I love Bella J. Bella J writes like a poet. There's a lot of emotions that go into these characters where they kind of feel like almost real life characters. Like I feel like I could be like, oh, that's my friend. Like when you go into a romance book, you think it's gonna be happily ever after, but with Bookmark, it was happy, but I don't know if it's happily ever after. Then I hopped into the 6th book of Ice Planet Barbarian series, Barbarian Prize. I once again don't know the character names. I don't know what this book is about because they all say barbarian in them, but it was probably another blue alien and a human girl. Have fun with it. Then I moved on to the 2nd book in the Mind F series. I think I talked about this one a little bit earlier. So far the series has been like a 4 stars. It's very entertaining. It's really good. I don't remember a lot of it, so. Next, I read a short story in a big book, and the book is called Monsters in Love, Wicked Tales and Monstrous Ever Afters, and I read the Gargle one by Gillian Grave. I love Gillian Grave. I think she writes really like smutty monster romance, and it's so entertaining to read, and it's so kind of like eye-opening to say the least. But I think specifically this Gargle romance was like not my favorite. It was just kind of like I didn't really understand what I was reading. I think that's more of it. I just didn't really understand what I was reading. Next up, I read the 3rd book in the Heartstopper series. Super cute. I love the Heartstopper series. Like they're just feel-good graphic novels. It's about Nick and Charlie navigating life together, and I think it's just so sweet to read. Next up, I read Here Comes the Sun by Bella J. I started reading more Bella J because I was obsessed with Bella J. This one is a friend's Friends to Lover, and it's two friends who like each other, but they just really won't date and like become exclusive and official. The male main character was like, I'm gonna give you a week. Every single day I'm gonna take you out on dates, and then by the end of it, you have to prove like why we wouldn't work out. It was super cute to read because 7 dates in like a book, like 7 romantic events. So sweet to read. Next up, I read Cookie Dough, also by Bella J. I remember not liking this one. I think I gave it like 2.5 or 3 stars, but it's partially my fault because this is the second book in the series, and I thought it was like the first book for some reason, and it's definitely not a standalone because they talk in this friend group and like with other characters as if like the reader should know it, which the reader should if they're reading it in order. I didn't, so I was like, who the heck is Jacob and who is he and who is she? Why are you talking about them like I should know them? But I should have, so it's kind of my fault. Next up, I listened to 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4 stars. It was still thrilling and very adventurous, but it also was kind of like, you have a gut feeling. Like I predicted who was gonna be. Okay, the last book I talked about was 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I don't know if I finished my thoughts on that. Let's see. To make that is the second time I've dropped my camera this week. I genuinely don't remember if I finished my thoughts, so I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. It was a 4 stars book, kind of predictable, but still thrilling and exciting. Moving on, I have a physical book. I read Mile High by Liz Tomford. I think this book was picked up by Boo Publishing, so this is I assume out of print by now. This is considered a sports romance, but I don't think so at all. I don't think there's any sports commentary on this. The only main thing is that he is a hockey player, but it doesn't even talk about like his hockey games or anything. Unless I'm remembering wrong, but I don't think so. This one was good. It was cute. It low-key was almost disappointing because it was kind of like stretched out a little bit too long, and it had a trope that I'm not a big fan of. I don't remember too much of it, but I remember not like hating it at the time I was reading it. Next up, I listened to I Wish You All the Best on audiobook. This was an amazing read. It is so good. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it, so I think it's very underrated for how strong and powerful it is. I don't know if it's categorized as YA romance, but there is like a romance plot in it, but I would say it's more subplot, and I think the journey of self-identity, coming of age is the bigger theme. Next up, I read Addicting to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is part of the all-famous Addicted series / Calloway Sister series, which is like a 10-book series in the end. Surprisingly, this was good. I remember when I first read it, I tried to read it last year, and it just felt very cringy to read. And I think that is like the whole part of this book because they're battling through addiction, and so they're kind of like miserable, they're unlikable, and they just want to cope, whether it's with alcohol or other things like Lily. So I think when I first read it, I didn't really get it. Giving this a second chance and really understanding like the way it was written makes a lot more sense. Next up, I read Flow by Kennedy Ryan. I think I listened to this on audiobook as well, but it is a short novella to the Grip series, which I really enjoyed this book. It is so good. I really enjoyed this book despite it being like super short. Like it was probably like an hour long on audiobook. It really just sucks you in. Next up, I have Fair Catch by Candy Steiner. This is a college romance. It's also enemies to lover, also a roommate romance, also a sports romance. So there's a lot of tropes going into this one book, and when I first came in I was like, oh, that is so exciting, but then like kind of like partial way through I was like, it might be a little bit too tropey. I don't remember like a lot of it, but I remember like the big themes, and I had a good time reading it, so I think that's all that matters. Next up, I continued on with the Bromance Book Club. It has a little bit of like mysterious aspects to it. I think all the men in the Bromance Book Club are so romantic, so sweet, so charming. They just have a way with words. Then I hopped over to the 3rd book because I bought Crazy Stupid Bromance thinking it was the 2nd book, but it was actually the 3rd book. And they're also friends to lover. Like they are friends, they know each other, they do like Legos together, and she has a cat that hates him. This one was also really cute. I think the whole series is so adorable. It's so good. Then moving on, I read This Time It's Real, and this one is so cute. First off, the cover. But if you love like K-dramas, C-dramas, and those like romantic movies that are just kind of like, oh, that is so not real life at all. Like the hopeless romantic female main character, she's a writer, she loves love, but she hasn't really experienced it yet. And then a celebrity trope. He is an actor, and I think he's in a Chinese drama, and they really took time knowing each other and like caring for each other and just helping each other before they really like establish a romantic relationship. Next up, I read Emily Raff. I read 2 Emily Raff books back to back. This one is so many tropes, like enemies to lover, friends to lover, one night stand into more, workplace romance, sports romance, bi awakening, best friend suddenly being in love, and just like so many things in one. I did not read that book. I read the book before it and the book after it, which are both short novellas. That was an interesting read. Then I read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. I listened to this one on audiobook and I surprisingly liked it a lot more than I thought, because a lot of people said it's very like cringy writing, very like cliche. They ended up working just fine. Moving on, I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. I thought January was so relatable. She's a little bit like too much like me. I love and hate to see myself in characters at the same time, because I'm like, you deserve happiness. Like, I don't want you to go through that. But also at the same time, I'm like, you're just like me. Like, I think Emily Henry read my diary and was like, I'm gonna write January. Guys, I keep on getting distracted. Like, my little cousin knocked on my door and suddenly I was taking like a 40-minute break. The battery is going down. The lighting has changed since like the start of this video. But let's push through. We can do this. The lighting might get darker, but the reviews will still be A+. Hopefully. Next up, I read Birthday Kisses. This is a short novella after A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime, which I have not read. I have a thing for not reading the main book and just reading every book that surrounds it. I don't know why. This one was fine. It's just like 2 people married and happy and they have a kid, and it's kind of smutty, and it's just celebrating her birthday with B-Day. Then I read Barbarian's Mate. Once again, just another... Did we already talk about this? I'm confused because it says Barbarian's Mate is book number 6, but Barbarian Prize is also book number 6. So I actually don't know the order of this book, but you don't really have to read it in order once you read book 1 and you kind of understand the premise of how these girls got on this island. Then I read Take a Hint, Danny Brown. I think this one was also an audiobook. Super good. I mean, book boyfriend to the core. I loved him. It's a workplace romance because he is a security guard on campus and she's a PhD student. I love their communication. I feel like they're such a mature couple and they talk through things so well. They're just a good couple. They're like a happy, healthy couple. Yeah, I think I gave this like 4.5, maybe 5 stars now. Next up, I read the second book in the Bergman Brothers series, which is Always Only You. This one is a workplace romance and it's about a hockey player, and I don't know if it's his assistant or social media manager, someone on the hockey team. It's so good to see like yourself reflected in the characters you read, but also these representation that means a lot to me. Like, I just love the way she writes the stories in these characters. Next up, I have Heartless by Ellie Silver. This is a small town romance, so you know, is it the good kind or the bad kind? Forced proximity, kind of workplace romance because she nannies his kid. But it was cute. It was fun. It was entertaining to read. I feel like the ending was kind of like a little bit too rushed. I just don't like the grumpy sunshine, and Willa's not really grumpy or a sunshine, but she's just like very extroverted and kind of immature. Sometimes I'm like, are you really in your 20-something? Because I feel like you're actually kind of like you're 13. Next up, I read Muscle and Monsters. This is on audiobook and I hated this book so much. It is so cringy. It is a monster romance, paranormal romance, and it's about a werewolf and a girl, but he doesn't turn back into a human. She's literally in a relationship with a werewolf, a wolf, and when they kiss, it's literally like a dog, it's a werewolf mouth. She's just making out with like that and fangs and teeth. It's just so weird. Then I read QB Tyler, My Best Friend's Sister. This one is fully in the male main character's point of view, and it's exactly what it is. It is dating his best friend's sister. When he was younger, he looked at her as like a child because, you know, he was friends with the older brother and like that's just his little sister. But it fast forwards into... Hey besties, it is a new day. I decided to make this a 2-day filming process because last night my camera died. This is just gonna work out better, but I also didn't realize how long I was filming yesterday. I don't even know what I said yesterday, but I just yap a lot. Hopefully today's process will be a little bit easier and things will be a lot smoother. My camera is charged. I have my water, so my voice is not gonna die, so I don't have to take breaks. Yesterday, I know I left off with My Best Friend's Sister by QB Tyler, which I don't think I really finished the review because the battery was like like charge me. I don't remember what was the last thing I said, but overall this book was probably like 3.5, maybe 4 stars. Next up, I read Ever After Always, which is the 3rd book in the Bergman Brothers series. This one is about a Bergman sister because the Bergman Brothers series is a bunch of siblings. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like a 4 stars. It was super good. Next up, I have Icebreaker, which is a reread, but I listened to it on audiobook instead of reading it physically. I think the next 6 books I'm going to talk about is all on audiobook because I did a video where I read 7 books in 7 days and they were all on audiobook. So we're reaching that point of the year. They just take care of each other really well and they just allow time for each other to process things, and I really like that. Plus it was like a lot smuttier than I thought it would be for like a cutesy little fun romance. Totally forgot. I have a stack of books that I can show you. Like I have the physical books of these and I just didn't put them up on camera, which I feel like that is the most exciting part, so you don't have to look at me the whole time. Next up, I listened to Titan by Gillian Grave. This is a paranormal romance. This is a gargoyle and a human. This book was like one of the first like spicy paranormal romance, monster romance I read, and I was kind of like, I didn't know I liked that. Like that was so entertaining. But I read this last year. I read it at the end of last year. For this year, I just reread it in audiobook, which I thought was great, but nothing really beats like the first time. Next up, I read Isn't It Bromantic? This is the 4th book in the Bromance Book Club. This one was super good. I felt like this might be a second favorite, and I don't know, is it because I have like a thing towards sports romance and the male main character is a hockey player, or was it just my second favorite and there's no explanation and no connection to the sports part? But overall, this book is chef's kisses. Next up, I listened to The Nanny. The family dynamics definitely gets kind of messy, especially with the aunt of the kid, and basically she wanted custody of the child, but he's the father, so he got custody. In the end, hearing like everyone's side of the story, it just felt very closure. I gave it 4 stars. I thought some parts were a little slow in the beginning, but overall the story was super amazing. Next up, part of the reread audiobook series, I listened to Twisted Hate on audiobook, which this is like one of my favorite books. I love this book. This book really got me into reading last year. Like this was one of the first book I read that was a 5 stars, and I was like, holy moly, I love this. Best twisted man, I said it. Next up, I read Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This one is a bodyguard romance, small town romance. She is inexperienced in bed and he is, and so basically he's like trying to teach her like how to be intimate. Super fun to listen to. It was one of those books where I didn't have to think so hard. I didn't have to use so much brain power, and it was just like a fun flirty little romance. And next up, I listened to The Honeymoon Crasher by Christina Lauren. This is the 2nd book, or like the short novella after The Unhoneymooners, and it's about Olive's twin Amy and how she finds love. I didn't connect to this at all. I felt the characters didn't have any chemistry. Like you could not convince me they were in love, and I don't think they made it past the epilogue. They definitely did not make it past the epilogue. Then I listened to Throttle by Lauren Asher. This, oops, some books are falling. I thought this one was really relatable because I also make YouTube videos and so does she, and I also vlog and so does she. What did I even say? Entertaining while I'm reading them, but I don't think it's one of those books that like really stick with me and I remember forever. Next up, we have You Deserve Each Other. I ended up absolutely loving this book. Once again, Marriage in Trouble, which unexpected, but this one is so much more emotional and connective than I thought it would be. Oh, my books are falling. I came into this book thinking they were like an engagement in trouble and they don't want to get married anymore, but the bill for the wedding is so high, so they're pulling pranks on each other, and whoever calls off the wedding basically has to pay the bill. But it was so much more emotional, and the female main character is a little bit too much like me, and I love to see that, and it was just so good to read. Next up, I also read another top favorite book of mine. This is The Trouble with Hating You. It is, I guess it could fall under Marriage in Trouble, but they are supposed to be arranged like in a marriage, and they kind of formed like this enemy, like hating each other tension right away because she did not want to be in an arranged marriage and he was just coming over to meet like her family, and she like ran away. Super emotional, super good, very vulnerable, and just calling men out and calling the community out for injustices. And this has a special place in my heart, and I love this one so much. After that book, I listened to The Sinner on audiobook. The whole series itself is very taboo, but but the Sinner book itself was a lot smuttier than I thought. I feel like the whole book was just smut. Very low on relationship connection, but I feel like how they connect is through the smut. So if that works for them, then that works for them. High spice, for sure. Next up, I read Rafe, a buff male nanny, which that is part of the title. I did not say that myself. I surprisingly didn't really like this one. I felt like the characters weren't really connecting. Like, I didn't understand anything about them and like why they were in love, because there was nothing that built up to them being in love. Like, there was like this instant attraction. They decided not to act on it because he's gonna work for her, like her nanny. It definitely didn't feel like they were in love. Like, I don't buy it. Next up, I read Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This was one of my highly anticipated reads because, once again, I loved Icebreaker, so I was like, I need the next book in this series, and this is about Russ and Aurora. This was very low on the hockey aspect because it takes place in the summer. There's just something about Hannah Grace characters that they're just so communicative. They talk to each other so well. They take care of each other so well. And Russ in this one, he is so sweet. He's such like a shy boy. I love their friend group so much. I think that's like the one thing about like series, especially college series, it's that there's always a strong friend group, and I love reading about that. Next up, I read Out on a Limb, and I listened to this one on audiobook. This one was so good. I came into it thinking like it's gonna be a good book to have on audiobook in the background, but I kept on fighting myself wanting to like listen to it all the time because it was that good. There's just something about the way these two communicate, the way they take care of each other. It is an accidental like pregnancy trope, and I'm usually not a fan of that, but this one is done right. Like, accidental pregnancy done right. It was great to read, especially the part where she was getting an ultrasound, but like she couldn't help herself but asking like, do they have 10 fingers and 10 toes? And the nurse was like, yes, 10 fingers, 10 toes. And then she cried because she felt relieved, and then she cried harder because she felt guilty for even asking, because she knew deep down she would love her child no matter what. I feel like that part is so vulnerable and raw, and it was just so like, so human is like the one word I want to say it. Emotions are complicated, and I felt like the way the scene played out, it had like stuck with me like really deeply. That is the 63 books I read, but I realized I also read 64 books, so we're gonna talk about the very last one. I just finished Bittersweet by Morgan Elizabeth, and I kind of wish I ended up the year finishing Out on a Limb and not this book, because this book was absolutely not it for me. I finished the whole entire audiobook because I was on a 5-hour drive like 2 days ago, and so I was like, I'm just gonna play it because I was driving by myself. It was not good at all. I hated the male main character. I hated the female main character. Okay, like misogynistic how he thinks, and he kept on saying my girl, my sweet girl, my like, he like was possessive of her and kind of almost like looking at her like property and like ownership of her. He kept on saying that, and I was just like, that's disgusting. So that's the way I ended off the year. Those are all the books I read this year. 64 books, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, that's more than one a week. Thank you so much for watching this super long video, and I hope you enjoy. I hope you got some book recommendations or books to avoid, because I felt like I was a hater in this video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy, and I'll catch you on the flip side, which is next year. How is that real? I don't even know, but I love you guys. Thank you so much for an amazing year on YouTube, and I can't wait for more adventures. Bye.